Okay.
All right. We're all live? Good to go? All right. All right. Hi, everybody. It's Alex Grichuhin again, the Director for Pulmonary and Cardiac Rehabilitation. Today's live stream, again, we were supposed to start at 11 o'clock. I'm sorry, 11 o'clock, but there was some technical difficulties with the audio, so we want to make sure that we give everybody a really good session, like a really good good viewing. Anyways, today I'm going to be there's a few questions here that I would like to address. First off is I see, how do you stop breathing fast? There's another one. Sure, am I getting that right? So, how do you stop breathing fast? Then this other question is, even though my oxygen doesn't drop, upon exertion I am winded and can't breathe. Why? I must stop and catch my breath before I move anywhere. Next question is, can you demonstrate the correct way to use a nebulizer? I think that's actually really good. Can COPD or emphysema be stabilized, or is a slow progressive disease? How do I slow, and this is the last question is, how do I slow my breathing down when I am anxious? Okay, so first off, let's address the first question, okay? How do I stop breathing fast? So on an autonomic system, meaning like you don't control your heart rate, you don't control some of the things inside your body, you know, how it functions. Your body does this automatically, okay? So that's autonomic, right? So when you're breathing fast, your body's sending a signal telling you you are winded. Okay, so it's going to encourage you, right? It's going to basically send that signal feeling like I'm hungry for air, making you want to breathe quick. Okay, there is nothing wrong with breathing quick. So how do I stop breathing fast? I need to know a little bit more information before I can address this fully. I'm assuming, this is from what I'm reading off of this, is how do I stop breathing fast? Question mark, and that's it. Okay, it's not giving me enough data to kind of address this. What's going on that's causing you to breathe fast? Are you sitting still breathing fast? Are you walking and breathing fast? Like, I don't know the situation. So it's kind of hard to address this question and answer this question properly just because I don't know what's going on. You're not giving me enough information here. Okay? If you are breathing fast during exercise, like there's this question, even though my oxygen doesn't drop, upon exertion I am winded and I can't breathe. So I've mentioned this a billion times. I don't understand, unless this person has never been through any pulmonary rehab before, or at least ours, that we address this specifically. But it says, even though my oxygen doesn't drop, upon exertion I am winded and I can't breathe. Why? I must stop and catch my breath before I move anywhere. So oxygen doesn't cause out of breath. It's CO2 that causes out of breath. We already know this. You know, all you have to go, if you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and, you know, all the others, but if you follow us and you watch some of these videos that we do, we address this specifically. So I'll bring this up again, even though I brought it up a billion times. Out of breath isn't caused by oxygen. Like if I wrote up here, let's say I wrote up here. Let's say this. Let's say my SpO2 in percent. Here's my pulse ox, and this is my heart rate. Okay. So let's say my heart rate is 70 beats per minute. And let's say my SpO2 is 80, let's say 85%. You could not feel out of breath off of oxygen being at 85%. You couldn't. You know, a lot of people ask me, well, Alex, how come I'm out of breath when my oxygen is down to 85% or down to 80s? I said, because you're not looking at the physics. You're looking at the numbers. Everybody doesn't understand sometimes that if you breathe in shallow and you're only supplying a little bit of oxygen into that body, your oxygen numbers, your SpO2, which is found in your pulse oximeter, is going to go down because you're not pulling in enough oxygen for its demand. It's demanding a gallon, and you're only breathing in maybe so shallow that you're only breathing in maybe a couple tablespoons of air. Well, if you're not giving enough oxygen into the body, then the oxygen is going to drop. But that has nothing to do with being out of breath. This, you couldn't feel out of breath. Okay, and how do I know that? Well, I've been doing this for decades. I'm also very, very good at what I do. But this is specifically all I do is pulmonary and cardiac rehabilitation. So I could not feel out of breath at 85/70. It's just, it won't happen. Okay? Now, if I did something like this instead, let's say I did this. Let's say my heart rate is 100 and, let's say 30. 130, okay? If my oxygen is 85 and my heart rate's 130, my heart rate's high, that means my work of breathing is going to be high. A good way of looking at how out of breath somebody is, or how high somebody's CO2 levels are, is looking at their heart rate, okay? Not their oxygen. Okay, not their oxygen, is looking at their heart rate. If the heart rate's high, CO2 is going to be high. Okay, so that I could feel out of breath, but I'm not looking at my oxygen, I'm looking at my heart rate. Oxygen doesn't cause out of breath. Take a look at, for instance, look at carbon monoxide, CO poisoning. Okay, CO, carbon monoxide. Does it ever state you're out of breath? No, it never states that you're out of breath. What does it state? Major migraine. Okay. What else? Dizziness. Okay. What else would I feel? Balance. Balance would be off. I'll be dizzy. I'll have a major headache. What else? Like there's not enough oxygen going into my body, so I'm gonna be like trying to go somewhere, and because there's not enough oxygen going into my body, okay? Because the carbon monoxide is actually being bound onto with, instead of oxygen, the hemoglobin. So on a red blood cell, you have these hemoglobins. Okay, if they're binding onto oxygen, let's say they're all binding onto oxygen, then that red blood cell is 100% saturated with oxygen. The pulse oximeter can't determine if it's oxygen or CO. All it knows is that something is binding onto the hemoglobin site. Okay, so it doesn't know that. Let me take the 2's away and put CO. Okay, so that's CO, not CO2. That's CO right now. That's carbon monoxide. What would your SpO2 value be if all these hemoglobins were attached, were binding onto the not the receptors, but if it was binding onto carbon monoxide? What would your SpO2 be shown? Not CO2 retainer. I'm not talking about that, guys. You guys got to please listen, okay? We're talking about carbon monoxide poisoning. If my red blood cells are saturated, okay, with carbon monoxide instead of oxygen, so I'll bring this up again here. If this was just oxygen, then my SpO2 would be 100% saturated. Okay? My SpO2 would be 100% saturated. If this was CO on it instead of carbon monoxide, my pulse ox would state what would be my oxygen saturation on my pulse ox. What would it show on my pulse ox? So remember, if it was oxygen on there, it would be, the SpO2 would be 100%. I replace the oxygen with CO on each of these hemoglobins on this red blood cell. Now, what is my SpO2 value? Before it was 100% oxygen saturated, because I put oxygen in all these little X's, which represented hemoglobin, okay, and that was 100% saturated. Now that I have CO, carbon monoxide, not dioxide, now that I have CO on there, what is my SpO2 value now? No, it's not 85. No worries, Pamela. It's not a bad answer, but it's not the correct one. What would be my SpO2 value now? 100%. My pulse ox would register 100% now. Okay? This was for something different. My pulse oximeter doesn't know it's carbon monoxide. It's not a gas analyzer. Oh, it assumes oxygen. The pulse oximeter is assuming oxygen. Okay? So if these red blood cells were binding on to, let's say you have somebody, let's say you have a loved one, okay? So you have a loved one, and they're lying in bed, and let's say they're a little blue in the face, okay? Very pale, very out of it, and you put a pulse oximeter on their finger, you wait that 30 seconds, right? You look at the numbers, it shows 100%. But their lips, that person's lips, their gums, sublingual glands also on the inside the mouth, right in the side, sublingual. That is all blue. Let's say it's a pale blue. Okay? But the pulse oximeter is showing 100% oxygen. Okay, what am I trying to get at? Somebody's laying in the bed, they're completely out of it. Their oxygen saturations show 100%, but they're blue in the face. They're cyanotic. See, the pulse ox doesn't know it's oxygen. The pulse, your little instrumentation, it doesn't know it's oxygen. It has no idea what gases are on there. All it knows is there's a gas on there. So it's registering that. Okay, it's registering that. It does not know if it's oxygen or not. So it's showing 100% saturated. What you don't realize is that a pulse oximeter is registering a gas that's on the red blood cell. On this, I took away the C's, right, representing carbon monoxide. I took away the C's and just put O2. If I had O2 saturated on there instead of carbon monoxide on the red blood cells, okay, that will show 100% saturated of oxygen. If it's carbon monoxide that was on there instead of oxygen, the pulse oximeter would still register 100%. It does not know it's carbon monoxide. That's why it's always assessments. You always do assessments on somebody. You don't assume like, oh, somebody's at 100% oxygen, they're fine, let's just leave. They're just blue in the lips because maybe they ate grapefruit or something. I have no idea. You know, they just ate a blueberry. I don't know. The thing is that the pulse oximeter shows a sat, and that saturation, let's say, is 100%, but the person's blue in the face. See, the pulse ox doesn't know it's a carbon monoxide. It has no idea because it's not a gas analyzer. If your pulse oximeter was a gas analyzer, I can easily take my pulse oximeter, turn it on, and wave in the air like it just don't care, right? And it will register the oxygen in the room I'm in. But it doesn't do that. It shuts right back off. It says the finger is out and it just shuts right back off. It's not measuring the oxygen in the atmosphere, is it? Because it's not a gas analyzer. Guys, pulse oximeters are never gas analyzers. Okay, it is not a gas analyzer. So, could I feel out of breath like this? If my heart rate, if my oxygen, let's pretend this is oxygen this time. Okay, let's take this away. With carbon monoxide, it will never state that you're out of breath because the out of breath isn't caused by oxygen. It's caused by CO2. When CO2 climbs a little bit above its threshold, okay, then you start feeling that work of breathing feeling, like I'm starting to feel out of breath, okay? Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So I'm starting to feel out of breath. So CO poisoning. What you thought was true with oxygen dropping, and according to that question I just read out, let me reread that question here. Even though my oxygen doesn't drop, upon exertion I am winded and I cannot breathe. Why? I must stop and catch my breath before I move anywhere. That's telling me that that person thinks that they're out of breath because their oxygen is not dropping. They're wondering why. Oxygen doesn't drop on out of breath. Okay? If your oxygen was low during out of breath, it just means you weren't breathing in enough oxygen. It doesn't necessarily mean supplemental oxygen. It just means your volume, how much air can go into my lungs. Was there a class yesterday? No, there was not a class yesterday. It's Wednesday is class. The holiday moved. I mentioned that on Friday we're going to be off. I mentioned that on Wednesday that we're going to be off on Friday and Monday. So this week, Wednesday, there is class. No worries, Linda. Okay? So what I was stating here was, let's say if my oxygen is low, okay, that means I'm not breathing in enough oxygen. The demand of oxygen might need, like my body on my VQ ratio might need, let's say, a gallon of air, okay? But I'm only supplying it by breathing shallow, maybe 1/16 of a gallon. So obviously my oxygen level is going to drop, but that won't cause me to be out of breath. When I breathe in shallow, am I exhaling a lot of air out? No, I can't, because there's no third direction. If you breathe in shallow, you can only exhale shallow. It's not like you can breathe in shallow and get rid of a gallon of CO2. That doesn't work that way. So I breathe in a gallon. Let's say I breathe in very shallow. I can only exhale a little bit. Okay, I can only exhale a little bit of CO2. That means my CO2 level is going to keep climbing up because I'm not exhaling a lot out. Okay, so I'm not exhaling a lot out of there. All right, out of my body, out of my system, my respiratory system. All right, so could I feel out of breath at oxygen at 100%, my heart rate 130? Yes, you are out of breath. Okay, now how about if let's say my oxygen was, I'll write it in red. Let's say my oxygen was down to 34%. Well, you would be dead if that was true. Okay? So obviously that can't be a correct number. So if you saw a number like that, then it would have to be an erroneous reading. It has to be incorrect completely. And why should it be incorrect? Because you would be dead if that was true. Right? Okay, because our heart stops at what? Does anybody know that answer? When does my heart stop? If my oxygen drops to a certain amount, my heart will stop. Does anybody know what number that is? So your heart stops around 40%. So your oxygen drops all the way down to 40, your heart's about to stop, if not already. And before that time even happened, you're either in a coma or completely passed out. Because people usually pass out around 70s. You know, if they go down to 60s, they're lucky if they didn't pass out. Okay? So if my SpO2, let's say 85%, my heart rate is 70 beats per minute. I could not feel out of breath at a heart rate of 70 beats per minute. Okay? Try to look at a heart rate equivalent. Heart rate is equivalent to what? CO2. Just look at it that way. You can also look at heart rate as the factor of work of breathing. Okay? SpO2 is completely a different animal. It is not oxygen at all. Let's see, Mard followed this account. These exercises really help strengthen my lungs. No problem, no problem. I'm glad it helps you. You know, in the program itself, it's actually a lot more successful because there's peer review. You have clinicians like me that watch and see you do the therapy while you're in session. So if you find that this helps, you'll be more helped if you actually get into the program itself. But no worries. I have an air purifier and I try to keep filters clean. I was curious if this could cause congestion. So if the humidity is very high, yes, it could. It is very, very high. Usually humidity is around 47 natural. about 47, non-natural. So when we go above that threshold and it's very humid, your nose is going to start, secreting a little bit more fluid. Your mouth, everything, you might feel a little congested inside your lungs, but you won't drown that way. Let me just put that out there. You're not going to drown, okay, unless there's a tremendous amount of water coming in you, but you're not going to drown, okay? It's a common misconception where somebody, if there's water entering in their lungs, they're going to drown. Your body won't allow you to do that. So like drown victims, I've seen a lot of drown victims. Being in respiratory, I see that, especially being a diver, because I'm also a diver, okay? So let's say you take a drown victim, all right? You take that person who just drowned, okay? So they just drowned. You do a blood gas on that person, right? Let's say you do a blood gas. What would their oxygen look like? It'll probably be really, really low. What would their CO2 levels be like? All the way very, very, very high, because there's no ventilation, because the water is preventing that. But anyways, let's say you have somebody who just drowned, but they didn't pass out from the drown. They were about to drown all the way. The water won't make it all the way down to the lungs. It will close up. Your airways will close up before that happens. When you pass away, your airways will dilate as the muscles relax from death. And then water will start going into the lungs at that point. It won't go in beforehand. So if you, let's say you try to take a gallon of water or a cup of water and you try to inhale it, your body will never allow that to happen because it will die. Okay, so what's going to happen? As soon as you try to inhale that water, you're going to start coughing, and then your airways start not dilating, but start constricting your airways. Instead of it being all wide open, your body doesn't want to allow any water to come in, so it's going to close it off. That's naturally what will happen. It's not asthma, okay? It's just body doesn't want to die. So it's thinking, all right, well, let me do this. Let me constrict the airway to prevent the water from coming into my lungs. But then when you pass away from drowning, your airways, all the muscles relax, including your airways. So your airways relax, and it'll start back to dilation, and then the water will start coming in. So let's say you have somebody who drowned. There was no water in their lungs. What does that mean? If there was no water in that person's lungs. Somebody just drowned. They brought into the emergency room. The person is semi-responsive. The person just supposedly drowned, but there's no water in their lungs. How did the person pass out? Airway closure. The airways closed up, and the person passed out from that. Okay. Versus this, somebody comes in from into the ER, emergency room, right? ER, and you found water from the pond they were in. You found water in their lungs. That means the person passed out and died, and then the water came into their lungs. Okay, so you can't really drown. It's a common misconception. Oh, if you drown, the water's going to go in your lungs. No, that's after you die, not before that. Okay. All right, so let's see here. I hope I explained this question as even though my oxygen doesn't drop upon exertion, I am winded and can't breathe. Why? I must stop to catch my breath before I move anywhere. I hope everyone understands that it has nothing to do with oxygen. Oxygen has nothing to do with your work of breathing. It's CO2. CO2 is a pain receptor. It's like a pain receptor. So meaning like it's a gas, but when CO2 climbs, carbon monoxide, dioxide. When CO2 climbs, the pH starts to drop. What happens when pH drops? It becomes acidic. So how does it feel? You're not going to feel burning sensation, not really. What you're going to feel is out of breath. So that's where that comes from. So when you're feeling out of breath, it means it's not an oxygenation problem, it's a ventilation problem. You're not pulling in enough oxygen, and you might not be getting rid of enough CO2. Okay? All right, so I hope I explained that. And to answer this question, you're just out of shape. That's all it is. Easy. I know, no one likes the answers like that. I'm just out of shape. It's like, well, yeah, because if you're getting winded, but your oxygen is not dropping, so it's not a respiratory problem. Sure, you could have COPD, but I mean, the person who ran the Boston Marathon and won was an 85-year-old COPD person. Ran the Boston Marathon at 85 years old, whipped the buttocks of 15-year-olds going doing the Boston Marathon. So, you know, people say, oh, I'm too old for this. That person didn't think that. So, anyways. Now it says, can you demonstrate the correct way to use a nebulizer? Correct way to use a nebulizer. Well, we can go into that, you know, correct way of using a nebulizer. I have to address this big question here. Okay, so the question is, with COVID numbers rising and RSV numbers rising, how do I protect myself and my family? Why do I keep getting bronchitis, and can I prevent this from happening? How do I deal with a flare-up and control my anxiety of having one? Okay, so let's go over this first question. With COVID numbers rising and RSV rising, it's actually going up there quite a bit. Protection first. Droplet protection, or I shouldn't say droplet protection, but let's say you're going out in public. Okay, we should know by now that a mask might be a necessity, especially if you're going to be around people. Like, a lot of people don't realize that people that go to pharmacies to pick up their prescription are usually sick. I mean, why would you go to a pharmacy unless it's your regular regimen, you know? But some people that go to the pharmacy just went from their doctor because they're sick. So you're standing in line, let's say, with somebody else who could always, the rule of thumb here is always pretend everybody's sick. Just pretend like everybody's contagious. I hate to say that, but at these rises like this, it's people that are neglecting. It's negligence, okay? So if you go into a pharmacy or you go to a restaurant, you go out in public and you're going to be around a lot of people, the chances of one of them having something are very, very high. So then we want to wear a mask, okay? There are a lot of different types of masks, but you have the N95 mask, which is the higher level, okay, of isolation. But then you also, like, let's say I'm holding the most deadliest of all viruses or bacteria known to man, and they're on my hands right now. How does it get into my body to get me sick? Anybody who mentions this, I will give a water bottle out for free. I'll give you 10 seconds. I'll count. Gather your answers first. Write them in. And I will start the timer just a little bit.
Keep in mind the 30-second delay.
Okay. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Ready? Starting right now. Okay? 10 seconds. Free water bottle. Through your nose. Through your ears. Oh, you just, Marianne. Give one. I'll give one to Marianne. You mentioned all of them. Rub your eyes. Okay. So Gail, Facebook user, through your nose. That's not correct. Number one chance. No. So mind you, eyes are 70% chance. I'm going to make sure Marianne Vitarosa, she didn't mention all of them. She was the first one to answer, so I'm going to give a water bottle to Marianne Vitarosa. And those are the nice, here, let me show you the water bottle really quick. One second. You guys are still with me, no worries. 1 second, I just cut a frame. I know I should not have done that. Okay. Water bottles. These are water bottles. When you fill them all the way up, they are about 5.5 pounds if you fill them up. If it's too heavy for you, take some of the water away, right? If you fill up one that's 5 pounds and you put half of it in there, then you got 2.5 on each side, right? You get the lift, or fill them both up with water, and they're both 11 pounds. Anyways, you're very welcome. So anyways, water bottle, okay. The number one reason, okay, so let's say I'm holding the most deadliest of all viruses or bacteria, and they're on my hands. Some people say that it'll go through my skin. But that's not true. That doesn't happen. Your skin is semi-impermeable. It won't allow that type of stuff to go penetrate through the skin, unless it's a type of medicated that is topical. Like topical creams, they have a certain ingredients that allows it to go through the epidermis. Okay, but this skin is waterproof. Means you can put yourself in water. You might get a little pruny, but it won't absorb. It's not like you go into the ocean and you have a large salt content in your body because of the water absorption from the ocean going into your body. It doesn't work that way. Okay, if I go into a pool and I swim for like an hour, I don't get out with extra 20 pounds of weight added because of the water. You know, it won't go through my skin. What I'm trying to say. And trust me, I've gone down pretty deep in diving, and it doesn't do that. I promise you. So skin, it obviously wouldn't go through my skin. So eyes are number one, first off. Okay, eyes are number one. We give that about a 70% chance. So if you're holding the most deadliest of all viruses ever known to man, the chance of if you touch your eyes with that, and when do you touch your eyes, anyways? Does anybody know when you touch your eyes? I have no idea. I have no idea. It's just 1 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I just got it. Right there. So if you touch your eyes, nose is another chance, not as high as you think, and mouth, as well as the ears. Okay? The highest percentile is the eyes. Okay? The highest percentile is the eyes. Then it's nose, mouth, and ears. Why are more people susceptible of getting sick after they brush their teeth? Does anybody know? Why is the I'm not talking about oxygen. I'm talking about getting sick. Okay, but I don't want to deter the conversation over or just the discussion. If I'm holding the most deadliest of all viruses, okay, or I'm sorry, germs. Okay. Now they say brushing your teeth is not bleeding gums, Lenny. Not a bad answer, though. Not a bad answer. I kind of like that answer because that could actually be possible, especially if it's bleeding gums and it's in training. If the pressure's, like if you had a higher pressure in your mouth and you pushed, because, you know, in your blood has pressure in it, like inside. That's how we bleed out, right? So unless the pressure, now if if your gums were just bleeding, it probably wouldn't happen. But let's say the pressure increased in your mouth, then the pressure would go from high pressure to low pressure, and the low pressure would be inside your blood. If the pressure in your mouth, you guys know what I'm talking about? Right in your blood right now, what's your blood pressure? Let's say it's 120/70. So let's say you put fluid in your mouth and your gums are bleeding, and you go above, in your mouth, above 120 millimeters of mercury. Like that. Like really hard. Okay? Well, then whatever's there inside your mouth is going to go into the blood because that pressure, high pressure, follows low pressure. Okay? But anyways, the reason why people are more susceptible to getting sick when they brush their teeth is because of mouthwash. The mouthwash can kill 99.9% of all germs. It's usually like bottles like Listerine and other ones that have alcohol in there, okay, will state bad germs, but it actually means all germs, okay? Alcohol doesn't know if it's a good germ or a bad germ. You know, it's just going to kill all of them. So the reason why people are more susceptible to getting sick is now in the back of your mouth you have normal flora that protect you. And if you use mouthwash, I'm not saying don't use mouthwash, by the way. You just have to be cautious. But if you're using mouthwash, it will kill 99.9% of all these germs. That also includes the good germs that keep you safe. So in your mouth, you have normal flora that protect you. If you use mouthwash, you're going to kill them, right? And now you're vulnerable, right? Okay. So that's one way. So from all viruses ever known, all germs ever known. Let's see if we can jog somebody's memory here. If you've been in the program, then you should know this answer. All right, from all germs. Let's look at All germs, viruses, bacteria, as well as fungi, mold, fungi, and all that stuff. What is the percentage? What's the percentage that is harmful to you? What's the percentage that is harmful to you? What do you think? What's the percentage that is harmful? Anybody want to guess? Go ahead. Give a guess. We're talking about germs. What's the percentage that is harmful? Not all germs are bad for you. In case no one knows that. There's a lot of good germs out there. Okay, germs in general gives a bad rap. They give themselves a bad rap sometimes, or they have a bad rap. But what's the percentage of all germs, the ones that can hurt you? Percentage, what's the percentage? No, not 25. Not a bad answer, though. 50. 50%? Okay, so let me give you this answer. Does anybody else know? Does anybody else want to give it a shot? Just put up a number. You might be wrong, you might be right. It's 100 to 1 to get it right, right? Okay, so it's less than 1%. Less than 1%. That is true. You can find that off of the CDC, Center of Disease Control. Just look up, just type on Google, 1%. Thank you, Chris, after 1,000 years went by. I'm kidding, I'm joking. But it's less than 1%, okay? That is harmful to you, all right? You can find that off CDC. I didn't make that up. I didn't make these numbers up. This is literally written. So from all these hundreds of thousands of germs, only less than 1% is harmful to you. That means if you've ever gotten sick a day in your life, you got affected by less than 1%. Okay? You take, for instance, on your hand, you have normal flora. You have staph actually on your hands, so part of it, part of the normal flora. So that staph doesn't mean if you have staph on your hands, you put it in your mouth, you get staph infection. I hope you guys don't mind a little bit nerd stuff that I like to do. So let's really quick here. Let's say this is a cell wall. Okay. Here's a cell wall. Don't worry about it as virus, bacteria. Don't worry about that right now. So we have the ER. Okay. We have the Golgi apparatus. Cytosomes, lysosomes, mitochondria. Mitochondria is the powerhouse. It develops adrenaline triphosphates. That's the powerhouse of a cell. Okay. You have lysosomes. Okay. You have the Golgi apparatus, and this cell wall is it's made out of a material called it's a peptidoglycan. I might have misspelt that, but it's peptidoglycan. So that's the cell wall that it's made out of. Peptidoglycan is only impermeable to certain things. One thing it is impermeable to is a fungi, which if you ever take penicillin, okay, which is found in the dirt. So penicillin can transport past the membrane, meaning in order to kill this guy or kill this thing right here, you have to give it penicillin to go past the membrane to kill the inside, okay? But what will happen is actually your penicillin, and if you're allergic to penicillin, you just get another substitute. But that penicillin will actually kill the wall and then kill the inside of the cell, killing the cell itself, and that germ is dead. What else can I do to help with this? Let me read this other question here. I was having, I believe, the start of an exacerbation, and doctor started me on Friday, doxycycline 100 milligrams, okay, twice a day, and prednisone 40 milligrams 5 days, and then 20 for 5 days, and still not feeling any better yet. Is this normal? Okay, so medications don't usually work super quick like that. If you just started it Friday, it's going to be a few days until you start really feeling it. Now, the prednisone, you'll start feeling right away. But remember, when your body's fighting so hard to fix and kill everything, that means it's going to be using up a lot of oxygen for that, because the oxygen is the fuel, right? So if your body's fighting all these infections, I mean, you might have low oxygen or really low oxygen levels, like around 90, 89%, 88%. You stand up and walk a little bit, it'll start dropping. Your oxygen starts dropping. That's just what's going to happen. So what we usually like to do is tell the person if they are sick to stay in bed. Okay, because if you're sick, you might be dizzy, you might be diaphoretic, you might be sweating, you might have a high fever. Well, high fever, according to the dissociation curve, high fever, there's no brain on a red blood cell. So it relies on temperature and pressures to distribute oxygen into an organ to keep that organ alive, right? So it relies on temperature and pressure. Like if I took my hand and I submerged it into cold water, okay, and left my other hand out of the water, out of the cold water, I put a pulse ox on my, let's say I put a pulse ox on this hand that was in cold water, it might read like 50%. And my hand, when I pulled it out of water, is pale and blue on the fingertips because the oxygen released too quickly. Okay? If I checked with that pulse ox after I took it out, the water out of my hand out of the water, and I put the pulse ox on the hand that was in room temperature, the oxygen sats will probably be like 98%, 95, 96, 97, 98%. That's because the temperature was correct. The temperature was right. If the temperature is really low, like there was these people doing the polar bear plunge. Have you ever heard about those? So when they submerge themselves into water, they try to submerge themselves all the way into water. They stay in there too long, their lips start to get a little blue. Okay? Doesn't mean their oxygen they don't have oxygen in their system. It just means the oxygen molecules are releasing too quickly from the hemoglobin, because hemoglobin is based off of, it's what we call the dissociation curve. So it's based off of temperature. If the temperature's too high, like if you have a fever, you put your pulse ox on, it's going to read like nearly 100%. Because the attraction to the oxygen, let's say this is the oxygen molecule, I'm a hemoglobin, okay? I'm going to bind and hold on to this oxygen molecule as I go in through these arteries and veins, right? I'm going to hold on to them as I go through these arteries. When the temperature gets a little lower, I'm going to release it. That's when I release the oxygen. There's no brain on a red blood cell. It doesn't know. The body relies on temperature and pressures. Okay, so let's say the temperature was very high. I'm going to bind onto this oxygen molecule. I'm not going to let it go. Okay, so when you have somebody who's sick, they get out of bed, they feel dizzy. Why do they feel dizzy? When dizziness is more associated with low oxygen, but their oxygen levels on their pulse ox showing 100%. So what does that mean? There's not enough oxygen in the system? No, there's plenty of oxygen in the system. What's happening? Why does the doctor want you to stay in bed? Because there's oxygen in your blood, it's not coming out of your blood into the organ. Just because there's oxygen in your blood doesn't mean it's releasing. So the oxygen content is staying high with high temperature. And you're feeling lightheaded, dizzy, I'm going to go to bed, I'll go back to bed one second. And you're just vomiting, right, all over the place. Okay, so that's what happens, right? When you have a high temperature, you're dizzy, sometimes you're lethargic, you're sweating, you have a high temperature. The red blood cell is not going to release that oxygen. So the oxygen molecules, when you check with your pulse ox, is just going to read very high. Okay, let's say you dunk yourself into cold water. All right, your oxygen on your SpO2 on your pulse ox will probably read very, very low because the oxygen is releasing too quickly. That's not a good thing. Okay, high temperature, that's not a good thing either. Okay, let's see, can using a ventilator lower your CO2 too much? Yes, depends on the frequency, the rate. So the respiratory rate, like if we set a rate on a ventilator, and we set, let's say we set it to 25, 30 breaths per minute, let's say. Okay, that means the machine is going to demand a breath, and it's going to pull out too much CO2. We don't want to get rid of too much CO2, because if you get rid of too much, what is that called? Hyperventilation. So then by the machine, you're going to hyperventilate that person. The person is going to constantly come in and out of consciousness. And that's a very bad thing. But yes, it can. Of course it can. So hopefully within the next few days start feeling better. Yes, you should. You should very much in a few days start feeling better. Usually when somebody's sick, it's usually a 2-week thing. Usually, because you have the first onset, then you have the hard stuff you have to go through, the fever, the vomiting and everything. And then you have the dead cells after your body found a way to kill that infection. Then you have the result of the aftermath of what happens afterward. But yes, okay. So germs, really quick. I touch the surface. I could be holding the most deadly of all virus ever known to man, right? The worst germ. How does it get into my body to get me sick? Eyes, nose, mouth, and ears, right? Eyes are number one, right? So if it hits your eyes, most likely you are going to get sick. Plus, it's like a little hammock. It's going to, germ's going to sit back and just, prop up its feet and everything and just keep multiplying. So we don't want that to happen, right? So eyes are number one. Okay, now, because I'm holding the most deadliest of all viruses ever known to man, how did I get off my hands? Everybody says, oh, well, wash them, right? Easier said than done. Okay, so is regular soap versus antibacterial soap, which one's better? The antibacterial, you think? No, they're both the same. Both the same. You see, one just aids in it, but it doesn't really, it's not better than regular soap. Okay, so don't let people fool you and say, no, this soap kills 99% of all germs. I said, well, so does the regular soap. You're advertising it to sell more. I understand the gimmick, but it's not really true. You're just decreasing the surface tension, right? So anyways, so I'm at a faucet. I turn on the hot and cold at first, right? I let it warm up a little bit. Put my hand underneath the faucet. It's still cold. I'm going to turn it down because I want warm to hot, not super boiling hot. I'm just talking about warm to hot. And somebody told me they'd boil their hands. Don't ever boil your hands. That's ridiculous. But anyways, I don't know who would do something like that. It's crazy. But so anyways, I'm at a faucet. I get some soap, lather it up. Now, there's something called the Turkish twist. Does anybody know what that is? I wash my hands. What is the Turkish twist? I seriously did not make this up. A surgeon told me a long time ago when I was in clinicals. What's the Turkish twist? So if you take your fingers, curl them in, and as you're washing, you do just like that. You'll get the nail beds of both hands at one shot. It's called the Turkish twist. You're just cupping it. Okay, so you're lathering up. Don't forget between the fingers. How long do we wash for? Less than 2 minutes. You get 5 minutes, you're wrong. Okay, because you have normal flora on your hand. You don't want to get rid of those. So it's less than 2 minutes, more than what? 20 seconds. So more than 20 seconds, less than 2 minutes is how long you wash for. You can do your ABC, something like that. Like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Just don't do it really super quick. Just make sure it's at least 20 seconds. 20 seconds, but less than 2 minutes. Okay? So you wash with warm, soapy, right? Warm and nice and, so nice and warm and soapy, right? So nice lather going on. Okay. Then you rinse, and then you dry your hands. So don't shut the sink off yet. Take the towel, dry your hands, then take the towel and turn the knob off on both of the faucet, okay, with the rag or the paper cloth, whatever you used. Okay? So now you just killed every single germ that was on your hands. Okay? Now I'm going to go out in public. So should I go out in public like this? Here, hold on 1 second. 1 second, guys. 1 second. 1 second. Should I go? Ooh. Of course, I had to break something. Okay. Should I go to public looking like this? Like I'm ready for... I look like from the G.I. Joes, don't I? So I'm going out in public. Should I go like this, looking like an astronaut? No. That might be too much. But would I be protected? Yeah, of course I would be. Sure. But that might be an overkill. So an easy way would actually just taking a face mask. Simple face mask. You can put 2 masks or take 1 mask and put a 4x4 gauze just underneath, just on behind it, and put it around your face for a little bit more extra protection. The only thing is now you're adding a little bit more CO2 because that little mask is now covering your face. So when you breathe, if you breathe shallow, you might not be breathing deep enough to get rid of the CO2 inside that mask. So the masks add an extra 50 cc's of CO2. So when you have a mask on, you might feel that your work of breathing is a little bit higher because of the CO2, you're breathing in your CO2. And remember, when CO2 climbs, you start to feel what? Work of breathing. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Your mask is going to add a little bit more CO2, more dead space, so you might want to breathe a little bit deeper to flush the CO2 out from the mask. Okay, so when you have a mask, just breathe in a little bit deeper. You'll feel a little better than breathing shallow, of course. Okay. If I don't have a sink, then what do I use? If I don't have a sink, what do I use, everybody? You can use Purell, just alcohol, just simple iceberg alcohol. You can use just simple alcohol. I'm not talking about whiskey and stuff. And actually, that would work. By the way, it would actually work, especially if the proof is above 80%. Definitely would work. But let's not do that. Okay. So yes, Purell. So you can use Purell. You can use any type of hand sanitizing, liquids, things that are used for your hands. But yeah, when you rub it in, you do the same thing as you would when you're washing, but you just wouldn't do it for 2 minutes. You just wait until it's dry. Okay? All right. Hand sanitizer, exactly. All right. So, let's say I'm a little immunocompromised. What does immunocompromised mean, everybody? It means my immune system is not supporting everything like it used to. Right? So how can I boost my immune system up? What's the easiest way to boost my immune system? Easiest way is to exercise, by the way. Get your heart rate up. Exercise. Especially for allergies. People that don't exercise usually has a lot of allergies. People that exercise don't have as much allergies as the people that do exercise. From the people that don't, I mean. Okay, so exercising is really good. You can also add in foods like green teas, chicken soups, Dijon mustard, any foods that have, or you can add Dijon mustard to your foods to lighten the, it's something with the eosinophils. So when your eosinophils come up, it produces yellow sputum. So when you have Dijon mustard, I know it's yellow, but that's not what I'm talking about. The Dijon mustard, the spiciness of the Dijon mustard will actually lessen the likelihood of a full-on blown not asthma, but like allergy attack, right? So that's for allergies. Now, I'm going out, I'm a little immunocompromised. What types of foods could help? So I have garlic. What else do I have that can help out? Garlic can help quite a bit. Okay, natural black licorice root is the highest one, but I'm not going to recommend it. All right, there's too many people passing out and dying because they overdo it. Natural black licorice is a high concentration. All medications are derived from something natural. Okay, we don't just make stuff up. It's derived from something natural. We just concentrate it. Okay, that's what we do in the medical field, is concentrate them. So, there's a lot more things for immune support, but we are going to have a dietitian speak on Thursday, so I hope you guys will be in tune to that. That will be promptly at 11 o'clock. I hope not later. Okay, so I apologize. My bad. It's just an audio problem we were having a problem with. But does anybody else have any questions or anything? That's all I can go over today. Anybody else have any questions? You going to talk about the program? You want to talk about the program? You want to anything? Nothing? I'll give everybody about a minute before I log off. A minute to bring up. Let's see. You stated that eating chicken 3 times a week is good for you. Does that include ground chicken or turkey? So it says chicken. It doesn't say turkey, so I would go with what it says. I think chicken. I don't know about the turkey thing. You know, it's just, and if it tastes like chicken, I don't think it counts either, because I think a lot of things taste like chicken. But ground is fine. Ground is fine. Just tested positive for COVID. Any tips? Yes. Okay. If you tested positive for COVID, make sure, yeah, chicken broth actually works really well. If you tested positive, make sure your assigned clinician knows that you tested positive, because he or she might not know that you tested positive. But if you tested positive, yes.
Nicole isn't coming until 2, until after the live stream, unless you spoke to her.
No, I didn't speak to her.
Okay.
So, but can we do a live stream at 2 then?
Sure.
Yeah, if we can. Just she can go over some, just kind of give her some topics. So we'll have Nicole Platt. She's our registered dietitian. She'll come up live, but at 2 o'clock. So if you write down your calendars, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, just follow us. So then it will give you, a notification, okay, that we're coming on live. So remember, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, everything. So yeah, just follow us and you can get that. Get a little, I don't want to say a little dietitian. She is small, she's thin. But anyways, everybody, that's it. I hope this helps, and I'll see you back on Thursday. See you guys. Bye-bye.